This isn't therapy. This isn't complaining. It's just real conversation. Welcome, everyone. My name is Josh Van Dusen, and I'll be your host for Under the Helmet, a podcast about what happens after the call, kind of behind the scenes, things that most people don't see, things that go on under the helmet. I've been a paramedic and working in EMS and fire for the last 29 years. I currently work in a large metropolitan fire-based service with a high call volume. In my years of experience, I've seen patterns among first responders. I've seen first responders that work a long, successful career and never have any issues whatsoever. And they retire and go on about their lives and never have to deal with certain types of emotional stress and emotional trauma and mental health issues that other first responders may have to deal with. I've also, on the other hand, seen first responders work a very short time in the business and then have to leave because of the way that these tragedies have affected them. This is not a clinical view of things. This is not therapy. This will be conversation. I wanted to take the opportunity for this first episode to just kind of discuss what my visions are for this podcast. This podcast is for firefighters. This podcast is for paramedics. It's for law enforcement officers, dispatchers, spouses, children of first responders, anybody that calls home with a first responder. This podcast is for you. I'll start with things off with talking a little bit about dark humor. Dark humor can be used as a release, a way for us to kind of let the pressure off a bit. It kind of takes some steam out of the situation that we've just dealt with. It helps bond our crews, unbelievably. It keeps us functional, and it keeps us from freezing emotionally. People that aren't first responders don't quite understand the value of dark humor. They don't understand how we find humor in tragic situations. They don't understand that it's not actually the humor that we need, but the release. Years ago, I responded to a call at a convenience store where an employee had their arm partially severed. Upon completing the call and returning back to the station, one of the other firefighters in the engine made the joke that he wondered if the patient had been the victim of an attempted armed robbery. And at the time, it was funny, but it provided a release. It provided a much needed release for everybody in the engine that day. I'm not attacking culture because I firmly believe that we need dark humor in our business. The problem with dark humor is when it becomes avoidance. Avoidance from the traumas that we compile. I like to call these compounded traumas because we just keep stacking them on one after another. And we tend to pack them away in a box. A lot of times in busy services, you don't have time to process the call that you were just on before you're on to the next call. So it just gets stuffed in a box and stuck in a corner, and it never gets dealt with. And you never get to run through those pure human emotions that a normal human would process through those. We shut it up and we move on. One of the biggest things is that we can't I'm sorry, we don't feel that we can let our emotions show because we're supposed to be tough. We're supposed to be superheroes, and we don't want to appear as weak. The problem is when we pack that away, eventually the box is going to get full. One of my favorite analogies that I use is an Instapot, which, side note, is one of my favorite kitchen gadgets that exist. But on top of an Instapot, there's a valve. And as pressure builds, you can pop that valve and let some of the pressure off of it. Works like an old-fashioned pressure cooker. Sometimes dark humor is that pop in that valve for us. It lets off just a little bit of pressure, a little bit of steam. With a pressure cooker or an Instapot, if you don't let that pressure off and it continues to build and continues to build and continues to build, eventually the pot's coming apart and all the stuff that's inside is coming out. That's when we have a breakdown. And that's when we have tragedies within our ranks. These are the things that inspire me to do my podcast, to provide an avenue for fellow first responders to listen, to learn, to voice, and to process. Years ago, when I first started my career, I experienced a traumatic call, a mentally traumatic call for myself. This goes back to when I was the age of 16 years old. I started as a junior firefighter or a explorer at the age of 13. At the age of 16, my older brother and I, my older brother is also a firefighter, retired now. But we were on our way through town and we saw a glow in the sky. And as we got to where we could see, there was a residential structure fire. Heavy fire showing in the front. And we saw several people in the front of the house. We went to the gas station, called 911 because I'm old and this was before cell phones were prominent. We called 911, reported it, came back to the scene, and as my brother was dressing out, I was standing there waiting on the engine to arrive. I knew my dad would be coming. My dad is you'll learn more about him. He was a firefighter for almost 50 years. And he was also a pastor. But as I was waiting for the engines to arrive, I saw a lady approaching the scene. She was very emotionally distraught, and I learned that she was a mother of a baby that was still inside. She had gone to the grocery store and left her baby in care of another adult there. The fire broke out, and everybody was able to get out of the house except for the baby. As the mother approached, I just wrapped her up and held her and was awaiting for my father to arrive because I thought he'll know what to do. I was 16 years old. I didn't know what to do other than not allow her into a area that would have been very dangerous for her to be in. The engines were arriving, operations were starting to take place, and I just held her tight. And she is exactly how you could imagine she would be, knowing that her baby was inside. We knew at this level of the fire that there was not a viable patient inside. When my father arrived on the second engine in, I remember just pushing her into my father's arms, and I went to the tailboard of the truck and sat down and began to cry. And I cried and I cried, and I remember feeling that I was worried that some of the other guys would see me and think that I was a big baby or that I was weak. And so I tried to hide myself and not be seen. Many years later in my career, I look back now and I think, man, the culture that we've lived in for so many years of if you show emotion over a traumatic call, that it makes you weak. Or if you show that this bothers you or hangs with you, that it makes you weak. That we're all supposed to be iron skinned superheroes, that nothing ever affects us. The problem is that under the helmet, we're human. And this stuff does bother us. This stuff does stick with us. It is not normal. The things that we see and we deal with is not normal. It is not what we're supposed to see as human beings. So, having a stigmatism, having a culture of not being able to express your emotions or your feelings about a particular call, and as these things start piling on and we start packing them away, eventually it's going to come apart and it's going to show itself. We look now at the rate of first responder suicide, and it's extremely high. We look now at retired firefighters, retired police officers that had no issues whatsoever during their career, but when they retire, they start to have some of this stuff rearing its head and showing itself for them. I listened to a therapist speak one time at a conference, and their explanation for that was that we stay on high alert all the time, even though we may not realize it. My sons have made jokes about me because when I go into a restaurant, I won't sit with my back to the door. I scan the room when I go in and I look for other exits. I look for is there an AED here? Where's, because my brain stays on high alert all the time. When we retire or we come out of the business and our brain finally slows down and we're not in that hyper vigilant status anymore, then some of these traumas start leaking out. And we've seen a lot of negative effects mental health wise in first responders long after they have left the business because they're no longer in that hyper vigilant mode, and these things start coming out so that now we have to start dealing with them. One of the biggest goals for my podcast is that we can help wear away at that stigma that we're supposed to be superheroes and always tough and never let any of this stuff get to us. And we have made leaps and bounds over the past few years. Huge strides we've made for first responder mental health, but we've still got a really long way to go. In future episodes, we're going to have therapists coming and talking to us. We're going to have peer support professionals coming and talking to us. We're going to have fellow first responders, police officers, uh, other mental health professionals, firefighters, paramedics, and all coming and giving their input into this. And hopefully we can contribute to making advancements for first responder mental health. We all need an out. We all need an outlet, I should say, an outlet. Some way for us to crack that valve. It might be dark humor. For me, up until last year, I had my father, and he was my go to. I want to share a brief story with you. Back many years ago, in the small town that I was living and working in, I was a volunteer firefighter, and then I worked full time on the ambulance. And my dad was a firefighter in that town also. Late one night, we get a call for a structure fire with entrapment. We get on the scene. We find out that there's a 9-year-old child inside the residence. Firefighters made entry. They located the boy, and he had already deceased. I remember the firefighters coming out, the looks on their faces, the things that they were dealing with emotionally. And after all the dangers had been mitigated, I made my way in as the medic in charge. I made my way in and um, pronounced the death of the child. This whole scene went on for several hours, and it was quite late. We had to, once they brought the remains out, we transported them to the morgue. And once the scene was cleared, I went back to the station. At this time, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I picked up the phone and I called my dad, just like I did with every bad call that I had back then. The phone didn't even ring a complete ring. And he picked it up and he said, "I've been waiting for you to call, son." This small town that we had one radio channel for fire and for EMS. And my dad had heard all of the radio traffic that had been going on in relation to this scene. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, he was sitting beside the phone waiting on me to call. We spent our time talking about the events of the call and uh, kind of worked our way through that a little bit. But then I spent 45 minutes just talking to my dad about nothing. Nothing to do with the fire, nothing to do with the call, nothing to do with EMS, nothing to do with firefighting. We just talked, father and son. And that was my release. That was my pop of the valve. And that worked for me until it didn't. And there became a time where I guess I thought that I could handle a lot more than what I actually could. And I didn't call my dad as much. And so I didn't get that release. And I just started shoving them in that box. And after many years of doing this, my box was getting pretty full. I became a very cynical person, very angry person. It was noticed by my children. I would get comments like, "Why's dad mad all the time? Dad, all you do is yell." And I didn't see it. I just knew that they saw it. In 2018, I was working a music festival as a paramedic, and we had rented an RV to stay in during the festival. We were running the very last night that we were there. We got to go home the next day, but we were running the generator because it was really hot out that summer. So we had the generator running the air conditioner. Well, something was bent with the exhaust pipe and it fed the exhaust fumes up into the cabin of the RV. And it caused four of us to get carbon monoxide poisoning. And it was bad enough they flew all four of us out to area hospitals and started treatment for carbon monoxide poisoning. I can't remember the levels that were there, but it was extremely high. We'd been in there all night. I know that the neurologist at the hospital I was at told me that probably around 30 minutes more of exposure and all four of us would have been dead. That was my breaking point. That was where my box came apart. My pressure cooker came apart. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a anoxic brain injury, and it will mess with everything in your head. I had a lot of things that were coming back out to me upon all of the negative emotional side effects that came along with the poisoning. For the next year and a half after that, I dealt with anxiety attacks and panic attacks and depression, and just, it was terrible. It was awful. And I didn't know what was going on with me. I finally started seeing somebody to discuss what was going on. I thought it was all related to this carbon monoxide poisoning, and that's what I was attributing it to. But as this therapist and I dug deeper, we started to uncover some of these traumas that I have packed away, some of the calls that I'd run. And it revealed to me just how much I had put away and not processed. This led to being a passion for me. I didn't want to leave the job that I loved because I've loved being a paramedic and a firefighter since I started, since I was a kid. I can remember being a small kid and crawling into my dad's boots and putting on his coat and his helmet. And I knew then that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to leave my career field. I knew that something could be fixed. Something had to be fixed for me. Working with this therapist, I learned several techniques to try to process these thoughts and emotions and disturbances that I had. And after time rolled on, and after a lot of sessions and a lot of work, I started to get a handle on all this. I started to learn how to process it. I started to learn how to take care of it the correct way. So that became a huge drive for me, and it became a reason for me to want to help others and want to give back, I guess, a little bit, and to prevent maybe even just one person from having to experience the things that I've experienced. If we have one person that doesn't go down the road to suicide, if we have one person that doesn't lash out at their family, if we have one person that doesn't mistreat a patient, if we have one person that is able to learn to process this, then we've got a success. So that's the intent behind my podcast. And for the most part, this will be the only one where you only have to listen to me. But I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of share my vision with you and to kind of share just a little bit of my experiences with you. There'll be plenty more to come in future episodes. I've got a lot planned. I've got episodes planned with therapists. I've got a particular therapist that used to be a NYPD officer. I've got some peer support members that'll be on to talk about peer support teams. I've got firefighters that, not to reveal too much right now, but I've got firefighters that were instrumental in getting legislation passed that benefits us in the mental health realm. We've got police officers that will come on and talk about their side of things. We've got mental health professionals that are out here working alongside first responders that are going to come and talk to us. All of this is in an effort just for us to be able to provide information and answer questions and maybe just a little bit of a glimpse at getting some of these things off of our back that weigh us down, or even having somebody to recognize that they're on, that this stuff is weighing them down. So let's talk a little bit about the big monster PTSD. We see a lot of patients out here. We see a lot of just regular civilians that suffer from PTSD. PTSD in emergency services is quite different. The majority of PTSD that we see in emergency services comes from compounded trauma. There are those situations where there'll just be that one call that causes the issue for us. And that's very, very possible. But a lot of the times it is compounded. In doing some research for this podcast, I learned that the handbook that mental health professionals use for diagnosis defines PTSD, of course, as a disorder, but it has different categories and different elements to it that a patient has to meet for them to be diagnosed with PTSD. And part of the problem with emergency services is we may not meet all of those particular elements. So for a diagnosis of PTSD, sometimes we don't get it even though we're suffering. That is exactly what we're suffering from. So now there's a new focus and a new push for what's called PTSI, and that is post-traumatic stress injury. And that is from single events. And so you could have just one single event that caused this PTSI, and the treatment is geared more towards healing that injury. The good thing about PTSI is the majority of the time it's something you can heal from. It's something that you can bounce back from, as long as we don't compile them away where the problem becomes too large. If we can learn and train ourselves to process and deal with the PTSIs as they come up, then we don't compound them and we don't stack them in on top of each other, And we don't let that event become part of the next one. And then it becomes bigger, like the snowball effect. So that is a positive change in how things are being addressed and how things are being treated for post traumatic stress. Post traumatic stress is not the only diagnosis that we deal with either. There are so many different things that, so many different symptoms that come from our compounded trauma. Finding the right professional to treat these or finding the right outlet or the right release can be difficult for some of us. It doesn't have to be sitting in a group in a circle with everybody crying type of therapy. If that's what works for somebody, that's great. But that's not necessarily what the only way to process this stuff. It doesn't have to be with a therapist. You can have that one trusted individual being a coworker or a trusted friend or a family member. For me, it was my dad. And for many years, that was my release. Now that my dad's gone, I have other avenues that I use to be able to release and to be able to process those. I shared the story with you about calling my dad because I wanted you to know that that one trusted person can provide an outlet for you. And it doesn't, he was a first responder, but he was also my dad, a family member. First responders sometimes make really good trusted friends to share this stuff with because they walk the same line we do. They're out there doing the same job that we are. Some of the reservations behind that I have found are that first responders don't want to burden their brothers and their sisters with their problems. They don't want to put their issues onto somebody else when they know they have to deal with it the same thing because they were on the same call. But you never know how that might affect that person you're talking to. It might be a release for them because it can be a two-way street. That person also may have coping mechanisms that they've learned that they can share with you that might work for you. Or they might have resources that they know how to reach out to if needed. So the trusted friend or the coworker or the family member is a great resource in processing these traumas. In the very near future, some of the episodes are going to cover peer support teams. This was kind of a new concept to me, coming to the employer that I'm at now, who has a very well established and very well organized peer support team. That was unheard of back when I first started in my career. And for a while, in probably the early to mid 2000s, we started having critical incident stress debriefs after, um, I guess you would call them critical incidences or major calls. We would have a critical incident stress debrief where we would all come back to the station and we just kind of have a time to talk about the call and give everybody a chance to get some of it off their chest. I recall several years ago there was a school bus accident that took the lives of a couple children, and there was a large critical incident stress debrief set up with counselors and like that. The the problem with those was that was one day, and the minute you left that room or you left that hall or station, then that was it. There was no follow up to them. There was no checking on them. And I think that my guess would be that peer support kind of formed from that, saying, hey, we need to do something a little bit more. We need to go a little further than just that hour and a half after the call. We need to go a little further and check on our people. And we will kind of dive off in looking at some peer support teams in different agencies and even different types of first response. We'll look at it in law enforcement aspect. We'll look at it in the fire and EMS aspect, and see what comes to light from those individuals that come and share with us. I want to really look at kind of how peer support teams were formed, what was the motivation for forming them, and what successes they're having within their peer support team. And we'll look at all of that with each of these in future episodes. But peer support has been impressive to me in the agency that I'm at. I know several months ago there was a pretty major incident that happened, and peer support came out to the scene and checked on all the firefighters and EMS that were out at that scene, and then came back to the station, and we all had kind of just some one-on-one time with the peer support leader that was there. Kind of had a little bit of one-on-one time, and kind of said, "Hey, what are your needs? What are you feeling? Where's your head at? Are you okay?" I was even asked if I needed to go home for the remainder of the shift, take a little time to decompress. And so to me, that was huge that option was available, that this whole peer support concept just they kind of came in and just kind of covered our people to make sure that we're okay. And for several days after that incident, I repeatedly got a phone call. Hey, you doing okay? You need anything? Just checking in on you. You've got my number. Call it. Um, and it was impressive. It was really impressive to see that this organization has put that effort forth to make sure that our mental health is well, and to make sure that we are able to continue to function in our jobs. So that was very enlightening for me. As like I said, I hadn't had a ton of exposure to peer support before this agency. I'd worked with smaller agencies that didn't have those resources. So seeing that come in and perform was very impressive. And we'll look at that. We'll talk about the forming of the team and exactly what their functions are. Also, kind of want to ask some questions about what are some things that they look for to know that, hey, we've got a team member that might need our resources. And because I'm very curious, there's a lot of questions that I have for them when they get here, and we'll take the opportunity. I'll try to give you all enough heads up when our guests are coming in, so that you can email any questions that you might have for them. You can email those in, and I will be happy to ask them in our episode the questions that you've given, and of course, if you want them to remain anonymous, I will absolutely do that. But we will ask those questions during the episode, so that when the episode airs, you can get an answer to your question or your statement. Feel free to email me about anything, really, and if you have any questions about any information that I might have, I'll be happy to share whatever I've got with you. We'll post the email with the episode and a link to it, but just off, it's underthehelmettn@gmail.com. And so, feel free to email me anything, and I personally check those emails, and I'll get back to you as quick as I possibly can on them, and try to provide whatever information you need. But any questions you'd like to have, any show suggestions, any episode suggestions, please shoot them to me. I'll be glad to look into them and try to put together something based on your suggestions. Or if you have something that you'd like to contribute to an episode, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email, and we'll look into it. But I'm going to wrap things up for today, and I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm excited to kind of communicate with you all, and let me know what you've got. I want this to be kind of an open forum to where we can kind of cover a whole lot of things about first responder mental health. And this is a subject that's near and dear to me, as I've told you that I've had a lot happen in my years, and that have brought me to this point. So this is a big passion for me, and I really want to be able to be a benefit to some other first responders out there. So thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. And I promise that the future episodes will be a little bit more exciting than just hearing me talk for a little while. So please reach out, and I hope to see everybody again on a future episode. Once we get down the road a bit, maybe we can do some lives on YouTube or TikTok or something like that. But we've got a Facebook page set up under the helmet. We've got a TikTok set up under the helmettn, and we have got our email set up. I was trying to think of what else we've got. And our YouTube channel is set up, so we will be posting these videos on YouTube as well as going into the podcast forum. Hopefully be going on Apple soon, but we are on Spotify right now, so please jump on, watch our episodes, send me your feedback, and we thank you a whole lot for your support. Y'all have a great day.